I was 90 seconds away from taking a bite that would have killed me. Let me tell you about the moment my 12-year-old grandson saved my life with a text message, and how it led me down a path of revenge that consumed 3 years of what should have been my golden years. My name is Robert Hartwell, I'm 63 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered my own daughter was trying to murder me. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, whether you're in Los Angeles, Memphis, or some small town in Iowa, I need you to understand something. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife, burns hotter than any fire, and leaves scars that never quite heal. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you think twice about the people closest to you, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and knowing I'm not alone in this makes the telling easier. It was a Tuesday evening in October 2021, and the autumn rain was drumming against the windows of my daughter's house in Riverside, California. Sarah had invited me for dinner, which wasn't unusual. Since my wife Margaret passed 2 years earlier, Sarah had been making an effort to have me over at least twice a week. She'd cook my favorites: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. The works. That night felt different, though. There was something in the air, a tension I couldn't quite place. Sarah seemed nervous, fidgety. She kept checking her phone, glancing at the clock on the kitchen wall. Her husband Mike was working late again, or so she said, and it was just me, Sarah, and my grandson Tyler at the dinner table. Tyler was hunched over his phone like most kids his age, thumb typing with the lightning speed that amazed me. I'd been trying to get him to put it down and actually talk to his old grandfather, but Sarah surprisingly hadn't said anything about it. Usually, she was strict about phones at the dinner table. The pot roast looked perfect. Steam rose from the thick slices Sarah had carved, and the gravy pooled in all the right places. My mouth was watering. I'd skipped lunch that day because I'd been looking forward to this meal all week. At 63, after losing Margaret, these family dinners had become the highlight of my existence. I picked up my fork, speared a piece of that beautiful roast, and was bringing it to my mouth when my phone buzzed. Now, I wasn't quick with these smartphones like Tyler was. It took me a moment to find the message. When I read it, my blood turned to ice water. The text was from Tyler. Tyler, who was sitting directly across from me, not 3 feet away. The text read, "Grandpa, do not eat. Just trust me." I looked up at him, confusion clouding my mind. He was staring at me with eyes I'd never seen before, eyes filled with fear, desperation, and something that looked like guilt. His face had gone pale, and he was shaking his head almost imperceptibly. My fork hovered 6 inches from my mouth. The aroma of the pot roast filled my nostrils, but suddenly it seemed wrong, foreign. Everything in that moment crystallized into sharp focus. The way Sarah had been acting, Tyler's strange behavior, the fact that Mike conveniently wasn't there. I set the fork down slowly and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Sarah was 38 years old, had always been my pride and joy. She'd married Mike when Tyler was just 2, and he'd adopted the boy, gave him his name. They seemed happy, successful. Sarah worked in insurance, Mike was a contractor. They lived in a nice house in a good neighborhood. What reason could she possibly have to? But then I saw it. The way she was watching me. Not with love or concern, but with anticipation. Like she was waiting for something to happen. That's when Tyler sent another text. "Mom put something in your food. I saw her. Please don't eat it." The world tilted sideways. The room seemed to contract around me, and I felt like I was looking at everything through a telescope. My daughter, my own daughter, had poisoned my food. And my grandson, barely 12 years old, had just saved my life. I've lived through a lot in 63 years. I served 2 tours in Vietnam, buried both my parents, lost the love of my life to cancer. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for this moment. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Sarah was still watching me, and I realized I had to act normal. If I let on that I knew, God only knew what she might do next. My hands were shaking as I reached for my water glass, buying time, trying to think. Tyler sent one more text. Pretend you're sick. Say your stomach hurts. I'll help you leave. Smart kid. Smarter than his grandfather in that moment, because I was paralyzed by shock and disbelief. How do you process the fact that the little girl you raised, the one who used to crawl into your lap when she had nightmares, the one you walked down the aisle at her wedding, wants you dead? I cleared my throat and put my hand on my stomach. You know what, honey, I'm suddenly not feeling too well. My stomach's acting up. Sarah's expression changed instantly. The anticipation turned to something else. Disappointment? Frustration? Oh no, Dad. You were so looking forward to this dinner. Are you sure you can't just try a little bit? She was actually pushing me to eat the poisoned food. My own daughter. Tyler jumped in like the lifesaver he was. Grandpa, you should probably go home and rest. I can walk you to your car. That's probably a good idea, I said, standing on legs that felt like jelly. I'm sorry, Sarah. Rain check? For just a split second, I saw something flash across her face. Anger. Cold, calculated anger. But then she smiled that sweet smile I remembered from her childhood. Of course, Dad. Feel better. Tyler walked me to my car in the rain. We didn't speak until we were out of earshot from the house. Then he grabbed my arm. This 12-year-old boy grabbed my arm like he was the adult, and said, Grandpa, I saw her put something white in your food while you were in the bathroom. Powder from a little bottle. She didn't see me watching through the kitchen doorway. I knelt down in the rain and looked at this brave little boy. Tyler, why didn't you just shout? Why the text? His answer broke my heart. Because I was scared of what Mom might do if she knew I saw. She's been different lately. Angry all the time. And she keeps talking about money problems, about how everything would be easier if. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. If Grandpa wasn't around anymore. If there was life insurance money. If there was an inheritance. I drove home that night in a daze, my mind reeling. Every few minutes, I'd remember Tyler's text and feel that cold shock all over again. My daughter had tried to kill me. My own flesh and blood. But here's what I didn't know yet. What Tyler's text had set in motion was so much bigger than just saving my life that night. It was the beginning of a journey that would take me to places I never imagined, force me to become someone I never thought I could be, and ultimately reveal family secrets that had been buried for decades. As I sat in my empty house that night, staring at Tyler's text on my phone, I made a decision. I wasn't going to go to the police, not yet. I wasn't going to confront Sarah directly. Instead, I was going to find out exactly why my daughter wanted me dead, and then I was going to make sure she paid for it. I had no idea that this decision would consume the next 3 years of my life, cost me relationships I thought were unbreakable, and force me to confront truths about my family that were far darker than I ever imagined. But Tyler had saved my life with that text, and I owed it to him, and to Margaret's memory, to find out the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. The war between my daughter and me was about to begin, and only one of us was going to survive it. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face as she watched me lift that fork to my mouth. The anticipation in her eyes. The way she tried to convince me to eat just a little bit when I said I felt sick. By dawn, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I was going to investigate my own daughter. I know what you're thinking, why not just call the police? Report the attempted poisoning? But here's the thing about being 63 years old and having lived through what I've lived through. You learn that the truth is usually more complicated than it appears, and if you move too fast, you might destroy innocent people along the way. What if I was wrong? What if there was some explanation I couldn't see? And there was Tyler to consider. If I accused his mother of trying to murder me and I was wrong, I'd destroy that boy's life. If I was right, well, I'd still be destroying his life, just in a different way. So I decided to become a detective. The first thing I did was drive to the local library. I know that sounds old-fashioned, but at 63, I still believed in doing research the proper way. I checked out books on poisons, on criminal investigation, on surveillance techniques. The librarian, a sweet woman named Mrs. Patterson who'd known me for years, raised an eyebrow at my selections. "Writing a mystery novel, Robert?" she asked with a smile. If only she knew how close to the truth she was. I spent the next week reading everything I could get my hands on. I learned about common household poisons, about how to detect them, about how to gather evidence without contaminating it. I felt like I was back in the military, preparing for a mission. But the more I learned, the more terrified I became. Because if Sarah was really trying to kill me, she'd already proven she was willing to do it in front of Tyler. What would stop her from trying again? I needed to be smart about this. I needed help. That's when I thought of Tommy Reeves. Tommy and I had served together in Vietnam. He'd gone into law enforcement when we came back, worked his way up to detective in the LAPD before retiring 5 years earlier. If anyone could help me figure out how to investigate my own daughter without alerting her to what I was doing, it was Tommy. I called him on a Thursday morning, told him I needed to see him about something important. We met at a diner in Burbank, far enough from Riverside that there was no chance of running into Sarah or anyone who knew us. Tommy looked good for 64. Still had most of his hair, though it was silver now instead of the black I remembered from our army days. His eyes were the same, though sharp, observant. Eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. I told him everything. The dinner, Tyler's text, Sarah's behavior, my suspicions. I watched his face carefully as I talked, looking for signs that he thought I was losing my mind. Instead, he leaned back in the booth and let out a long, slow whistle. "Jesus, Bobby. Your own daughter? I know how it sounds, Tommy. But Tyler saw her put something in my food. That kid saved my life." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. Finally, he looked up at me. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to find out the truth. All of it. Why she wants me dead, how long she's been planning it, whether this was the first attempt. And I want evidence. Real evidence that would hold up in court. That's going to be dangerous, Bobby. If she's already tried once and you start poking around. I know the risks. But I can't just pretend this didn't happen. And I can't let her hurt Tyler." Tommy nodded slowly. "Okay. But we do this my way. Professional. Careful. And the minute I think you're in immediate danger, we go to the cops. Deal?" "Deal." That's how I found myself learning to be a private investigator at the age of 63. Tommy taught me about surveillance, about gathering financial records, about digital forensics. He had contacts who could help us access information legally, and more importantly, he knew how to build a case that would actually stick. The first thing we did was set up surveillance on Sarah's house. Nothing fancy, just me sitting in my car at different times of day, watching the comings and goings, taking notes. Tommy got me a small camera with a telephoto lens and taught me how to use it. What I discovered in those first 2 weeks shook me to my core. Sarah wasn't just living comfortably, she was living way beyond her means. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, a new BMW in the driveway. Her house was in foreclosure. I found that out by checking public records at the courthouse. She owed money everywhere, credit cards, personal loans, medical bills. But the real revelation came when I followed her to a meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Riverside. She sat down with a man I didn't recognize, someone in his 50s with expensive clothes and cold eyes. I was too far away to hear their conversation, but I could see Sarah's body language. She was desperate, pleading. The man was unmoved, checking his watch like he had better places to be. Tommy had taught me how to take pictures without being obvious, so I got several shots of this mystery man. When I showed them to Tommy, he ran them through some of his contacts in law enforcement. The man's name was Vincent Caruso. He had ties to organized crime in Los Angeles, and his specialty was collecting debts that other people couldn't collect. The kind of debts that came with serious consequences if you didn't pay. Sarah owed money to the mob. Suddenly, my daughter's motivation became crystal clear. She wasn't just facing financial ruin, she was facing physical danger. And apparently she'd decided that my life insurance policy and inheritance were her way out. But here's what really twisted the knife. I would have helped her. If she'd come to me, told me she was in trouble, I would have found a way to help. I wasn't rich, but Margaret and I had saved money over the years. I owned my house outright. I could have figured something out. Instead, she decided it was easier to murder me. The betrayal hit me all over again, fresh and raw as that first night. But now it was mixed with something else, a cold, calculating anger that I'd never felt before. My daughter had looked at me across a dinner table and decided I was worth more to her dead than alive. And she'd been willing to do it in front of Tyler. That's when I started planning my revenge. I know what you're thinking. Revenge is a dangerous game, especially for a 63-year-old man going up against people connected to organized crime. But here's the thing about getting older, you realize that some things are worth the risk. Justice. Protecting the innocent. Making sure that the people who hurt you pay for what they've done. If you've ever felt that burning need for justice, that sense that someone has to pay for the wrongs they've committed, then you understand why I couldn't let this go. Hit that like button if you know what I mean, because what I discovered next about Sarah's plan was so much worse than just poisoning my pot roast. Tommy and I spent another week gathering evidence, building a timeline, trying to understand the full scope of Sarah's desperation. What we found was a trail of lies and deception that went back months, maybe years. She'd taken out credit cards in my name. She'd forged my signature on loan applications. She'd been systematically stealing from me, siphoning money from joint accounts we'd set up after Margaret died to help with emergency expenses. My own daughter had been robbing me blind, and I'd been too trusting, too grief-stricken over losing Margaret, to notice. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Because as we dug deeper into Sarah's financial records and her communications, we started to piece together something that made my blood run cold. That dinner wasn't her first attempt to kill me. It was just the first one Tyler had witnessed. The stomach flu I'd had 3 months earlier, after another family dinner. The dizzy spells I'd been experiencing, which my doctor had attributed to grief and age. The night I'd ended up in the emergency room with what they'd called food poisoning, after Sarah had brought me homemade soup when I was sick. She'd been trying to kill me slowly, methodically for months. And if it hadn't been for a 12-year-old boy with a smartphone, she would have succeeded. As I sat in my car outside Sarah's house that night, watching the lights go out one by one, I made a promise to myself. Sarah thought she could manipulate me, steal from me, and ultimately murder me without consequences. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The war between us was about to escalate, and I was going to make sure I was the one left standing when the smoke cleared. But first, I had to make sure Tyler was safe. Because if Sarah was willing to poison me in front of her own son, there was no telling what she might do to him if she discovered he was the one who'd saved my life. The clock was ticking, and I was about to become someone I never imagined I could be, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. 3 weeks into my investigation, I discovered something that changed everything. Tyler wasn't the first person to try to warn me. I was going through my phone records. Tommy had taught me how to request detailed records from my carrier, when I noticed something odd. There were several calls to my number from Margaret's sister, Patricia, in the weeks before she died. Calls I didn't remember receiving. Patricia lived in Phoenix and rarely called. Margaret had been the one to maintain that relationship, and after she passed, Patricia and I had drifted apart. So why had she been calling me repeatedly in Margaret's final weeks? I called Patricia that afternoon, my hands shaking as I dialed. When she answered, her voice immediately went cold. "Robert? I'm surprised to hear from you. I thought you'd made it clear you didn't want to talk to me." "Patricia, I'm confused." "What do you mean?" There was a long pause. "Robert, I called you 6 times in September and October of 2019, right before Margaret passed. I was trying to tell you something important about Sarah. You never called me back, and then Sarah called me and told me you'd asked her to tell me to stop bothering you. That you were grieving and didn't want to deal with family drama." My blood turned to ice. Patricia, I never got those calls. What were you trying to tell me? Another pause, longer this time. Robert, are you telling me you never got my messages? Because I left very specific information about Sarah stealing money from Margaret's medical fund. The world tilted sideways. What? Sarah had access to the account you and Margaret set up for medical expenses, remember? You'd given her access so she could help manage bills while you were dealing with everything else. But Robert, she was stealing from it. I saw the bank statements when Margaret showed them to me during one of my visits. Thousands of dollars in cash withdrawals that Margaret didn't recognize, transfers to Sarah's personal accounts that Margaret never authorized. I felt like I was going to be sick. Why didn't Margaret tell me? She was trying to protect you. You were already stressed about her illness, working extra hours to pay for treatments insurance wouldn't cover. She didn't want to burden you with family drama. But she was scared, Robert. She asked me to call you after she passed, to make sure you knew what had been happening. And Sarah intercepted those calls. Apparently. Robert, there's more. Margaret suspected Sarah was helping things along. What do you mean? Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. Margaret's medications kept going missing. Important ones. Her pain medication, but also her heart medication, her blood thinners. The doctors kept increasing her doses because the levels in her blood weren't where they should be, but the medications kept disappearing from her pill organizer. Margaret thought she was becoming forgetful because of the cancer treatments, but now... I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto my kitchen table. Sarah hadn't just been stealing from us. She'd been killing Margaret too. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Patricia was still talking, her voice urgent now that she realized I was really hearing this for the first time. Robert, are you there? Robert, Margaret made me promise to tell you something else. She hid some of her jewelry, the pieces her mother left her. She was afraid Sarah would take them after she passed. She hid them in the house somewhere, left you a letter explaining where. Did you ever find that letter? I thought about Margaret's jewelry, how Sarah had insisted on going through Margaret's things to help me, right after the funeral. How several valuable pieces had mysteriously disappeared, and Sarah had suggested that Margaret must have given them away or lost them during her illness. No, I whispered. I never found any letter. Then Sarah found it first. I hung up the phone and sat in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of my wife and the echoing betrayal of my daughter. Sarah hadn't just tried to kill me. She'd been slowly murdering her own stepmother, the woman who'd raised her from the age of 8 when her biological mother abandoned her. Margaret had loved Sarah like her own daughter. Had sacrificed for her, supported her through college, celebrated her wedding, doted on Tyler. And Sarah had repaid that love by stealing from her and literally stealing years from her life. But here's the thing about discovering the depths of someone's betrayal. It clarifies everything else. All the pieces I'd been struggling to understand suddenly clicked into place. Sarah's sudden interest in having me over for dinner after months of barely speaking to me following Margaret's funeral. Her insistence on managing my finances to help during this difficult time. The way she'd been pushing me to update my will, to make sure Tyler was taken care of. She'd been setting me up for months, just like she'd done with Margaret. I called Tommy immediately. When I told him what Patricia had revealed, he was quiet for a long moment. Bobby, this changes everything. If she killed Margaret, this isn't just about money anymore. This is about a pattern of behavior. She's done this before. We need to find that letter, I said. If Margaret hid her jewelry and left me instructions, maybe she left other evidence too. That's breaking and entering, Bobby. Sarah's house is her property. She stole that jewelry from me. From Margaret's estate. I have a right to get it back. Tommy sighed. Let me think about this. There might be a legal way to search the house, but it's going to take time. But I didn't have time. Because that afternoon, I got another text from Tyler. Grandpa, Mom is planning another dinner. This Sunday. She's insisting you come. She seems really excited about it. Something feels wrong. Sarah was going to try again, and this time she might be more careful. This time Tyler might not be there to save me. That night, I made a decision that would have consequences I'm still living with today. I was going to break into Sarah's house while she was at work, find Margaret's letter and jewelry, and gather whatever other evidence I could find. I know what you're thinking. That was stupid, reckless, potentially illegal. And you're right. But when you're 63 years old and you've discovered that your daughter murdered your wife and is planning to murder you next, conventional wisdom goes out the window. If you've ever been pushed to a point where the normal rules didn't seem to apply anymore, where justice mattered more than consequences, then you understand why I couldn't just wait for the legal system to slowly grind through this. Leave a comment if you've ever felt that way, because knowing I'm not alone in this makes the telling easier. I spent the next 2 days planning. Sarah worked at an insurance office downtown and usually stayed late on Thursdays. Tyler would be at school. Mike worked construction and his schedule was unpredictable, but Thursday was typically his late day too. Tommy refused to help with the break-in, but he did give me some advice. If you're determined to do this stupid thing, at least be smart about it. Wear gloves, don't touch anything you don't have to, get in and out as fast as possible. And Bobby? If you find anything that proves she killed Margaret, you call me immediately. This becomes a police matter. Thursday afternoon, I sat in my car across from Sarah's house, watching and waiting. Sarah left for work at 1:30. Tyler's school bus wouldn't drop him off until 3:45. Mike's truck wasn't in the driveway, and I'd been watching long enough to know his patterns. At 2 o'clock, I walked up to Sarah's front door like I belonged there. I'd thought about how to get in. Sarah had always been careless about hiding spare keys, a habit that used to drive Margaret crazy. I checked the fake rock by the front steps first. Nothing. Then I remembered the loose board on the back deck, where Sarah used to hide her cigarettes when she was a teenager. The key was still there, 20 years later. I let myself into my daughter's house and immediately felt like a criminal. But then I thought about Margaret, about what Sarah had done to her, about the dinner she was planning for Sunday, and my resolve hardened. The house was messier than I expected. Sarah had always been neat as a child, but now there were papers scattered everywhere, dirty dishes in the sink, laundry piled on chairs. Signs of a life spinning out of control. I started in Sarah's bedroom, looking for anywhere she might hide important documents or stolen jewelry. Her dresser drawers were a chaos of clothing and papers. Her closet was so full of expensive clothes it looked like a department store. Then I found the shoebox under her bed. Inside were documents that made my blood boil. Copies of loan applications with forged signatures, my signature. Bank statements showing transfers from my accounts to hers. Credit card bills for accounts I'd never opened. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a silk scarf I recognized, was Margaret's jewelry. The necklace her grandmother had given her. The earrings I'd bought for our anniversary. The ring that had belonged to her mother. All of it, sitting in a shoebox under the bed of the woman who'd stolen it from a dying woman. But the real revelation was the envelope marked Dad's Insurance, in Sarah's handwriting. Inside was a copy of my life insurance policy, a policy I'd forgotten about from my military days that was apparently worth more than I'd realized, along with handwritten notes in Sarah's writing. Notes about dosages. About symptoms. About how long certain substances took to work and how they might be detected in an autopsy. My daughter had been researching how to murder me. And then I found Margaret's letter. It was hidden in the jewelry box Margaret had kept on her dresser, the one Sarah had claimed was empty when she'd helped me go through Margaret's things. The letter was in Margaret's handwriting, weak and shaky from the illness but unmistakably hers. My dearest Robert, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and something has happened to make you suspect the truth about Sarah. I'm so sorry, my love. I should have told you while I was still alive, but I wanted to protect you from this pain for as long as possible. The letter went on to detail everything Patricia had told me and more. Margaret had been keeping records, documenting the missing medications, the unauthorized withdrawals, the way Sarah had been manipulating both of us. She'd even recorded some conversations with her phone, though she wasn't sure the recordings would be clear enough to use as evidence. But the most damning part of the letter was the end. Robert, I'm writing this because I think Sarah is going to try to hurt you after I'm gone. Please be careful. Please don't trust her with your food or your medication. Please don't let her manage your finances. And please, if something happens to me sooner than the doctors expect, ask for an autopsy. Don't let her convince you that it's unnecessary or that it would be too painful. I think she's been giving me something that interferes with my medications, and if I'm right, there might be evidence. Margaret had known Sarah was killing her, and she tried to warn me from beyond the grave. I was sitting on Sarah's bedroom floor, crying over my dead wife's letter, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Someone was home early. The sound of that car door slamming sent pure adrenaline through my 63-year-old body. I'd been so absorbed in Margaret's letter, so overwhelmed by the revelation that my wife had known she was being murdered, that I'd lost track of time. I shoved everything back into the shoebox: the forged documents, the stolen jewelry, Margaret's letter, and slid it under the bed exactly where I'd found it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely function, but somehow I managed to get Margaret's jewelry into my jacket pocket along with the letter. If I was about to be caught, at least I'd have proof of what Sarah had done. I heard the front door open and Sarah's voice calling out, "Hello? Anyone home?" I was trapped in her bedroom with no way to get to the back door without her seeing me. The only option was the bedroom window, but I was on the second floor, and I wasn't exactly in shape for parkour. "Tyler? Mike?" Sarah called again, closer now. I could hear her footsteps on the stairs. In desperation, I squeezed myself into Sarah's walk-in closet and pulled the door almost shut, leaving just a crack so I could see. The closet smelled like her perfume, that same scent she'd worn since high school. Under other circumstances, it might have been nostalgic. Right then, it made me feel sick. Sarah walked into the bedroom, and I got my first good look at her through the closet slats. She looked terrible, stressed, exhausted, older than her 38 years. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged. This was what guilt and desperation looked like on a person. But then she did something that made my blood freeze. She walked straight to the bed and got down on her knees, reaching for the shoebox. She knew I'd been there. Somehow she knew. Sarah pulled out the box and opened it, her face a mask of cold fury. She went through the contents methodically, checking each document, each piece of jewelry. When she got to the envelope marked "Dad's insurance," she paused and looked around the room with eyes that had gone completely dead. "I know you're here, Dad," she said quietly. "I saw your car 2 blocks away. I doubled back and watched you break into my house. I thought about making a run for it, but there was nowhere to go. I was a 63-year-old man hiding in my daughter's closet like a criminal. The absurdity of the situation might have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. You can come out now," Sarah continued. "We need to talk." I pushed open the closet door and stepped out, trying to maintain some dignity despite the circumstances. Sarah was sitting on her bed, the shoebox open beside her, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was more like disappointment, like she was a parent who'd caught her child doing something they both knew was wrong. "You broke into my house, Dad. You murdered my wife." The words hung in the air between us like a physical thing. For a moment neither of us moved. Then Sarah's face crumpled, and for just an instant, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. "Which part? Killing Margaret slowly with stolen medication, or trying to poison me at dinner?" Sarah flinched like I'd hit her. "You don't understand the position I was in. The debt I owed. Vincent Caruso isn't the kind of man who accepts late payments or payment plans. He was going to hurt Tyler. He told me exactly what he'd do to a 12-year-old boy whose mother couldn't pay her debts. So you decided to murder your family instead?" "I decided to save my son." Sarah's voice rose to a shout, then immediately dropped back to a whisper. "Margaret was dying anyway. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe 8. I just helped her along. Made it easier for everyone. The casual way she talked about murdering Margaret made me physically sick. Made it easier? She suffered, Sarah. She was in pain, confused about her medication, terrified that she was losing her mind because her pills kept disappearing. You made her last month's hell. She would have suffered anyway. Cancer is. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to justify what you did to that woman. She loved you. She loved you like you were her own daughter, and you repaid that by stealing from her and killing her. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the jewelry in the shoebox. When she looked up at me, her eyes were filled with tears, but there was something else there too. Something cold and calculating. What are you going to do, Dad? Turn me in? Have Tyler's mother arrested for murder? Do you know what that would do to him? And there it was, the manipulation I should have expected. She was using Tyler as a shield, just like she'd probably been using him all along. Tyler deserves to know the truth about what his mother is. Tyler deserves to have a mother who's not in prison for the rest of his life. Sarah stood up and walked to her dresser, putting some distance between us. Besides, what proof do you really have? Margaret's letter? A dying woman's paranoid suspicions? Some jewelry that you stole from my house after breaking in illegally? She was right, and we both knew it. Even with Margaret's letter, even with the forged documents, building a case that would actually convict her would be nearly impossible. Margaret had been cremated. There was no physical evidence of poisoning. The financial crimes were serious, but they weren't murder. What about Tyler's text? I asked. He saw you put something in my food. A 12-year-old's testimony about something he thought he saw? Dad, I was seasoning your food. Tyler has an overactive imagination. Then let me test the leftovers. Let me have them analyzed. Sarah smiled, but it was the coldest smile I'd ever seen. What leftovers? I threw everything away that night. Food safety, you know. Of course she had. Sarah had thought of everything, just like she'd probably been thinking of everything for months while she planned Margaret's death and mine. But then she made a mistake. A small one, but in that moment it felt huge. Besides, she said, even if you could prove something, what would be the point? Margaret is dead. You're alive. I'm not going to try again. I can't afford to now that you're suspicious. So why destroy Tyler's life over something that's already over? Because justice matters. Because Margaret mattered. Because you want revenge. Sarah interrupted. Don't dress it up as justice, Dad. This is about you wanting to hurt me because I hurt you. She was right about that too, and her acknowledgement of it hit me like a physical blow. I did want revenge. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done to Margaret, for what she tried to do to me, for the way she'd manipulated all of us. Maybe it is about revenge, I said. Maybe that's exactly what this is about. Something in my voice made Sarah take a step back. For the first time since I'd come out of the closet, she looked genuinely afraid. Dad, listen to me. I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed. But think about what you're really accomplishing here. You turn me in, I get arrested, Tyler loses his mother, and for what? Margaret is still gone. The money I took is still gone. Nothing you do is going to bring her back or undo what happened. But it might prevent you from doing it to someone else. There isn't going to be anyone else. Vincent Caruso and I have come to an understanding. I don't owe him money anymore. That stopped me cold. What kind of understanding? Sarah's smile returned, but this time it was different. Triumphant, almost. The kind where I provide services instead of cash payments. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah, what are you talking about? Vincent has other clients who owe him money, Dad. Clients who have inconvenient family members with life insurance policies. Clients who need problems solved discreetly, by someone with no apparent connection to them. The room seemed to spin around me. You're saying you're killing people for the mob? I'm saying I've found a way to pay my debts that doesn't involve hurting my family anymore. Vincent is very pleased with my consulting work. My daughter wasn't just a murderer. She was a professional killer. I stared at this woman I'd raised, this person I'd loved and supported and been proud of, and realized I didn't know her at all. Maybe I never had. How many? I asked quietly. How many what? How many people have you killed, Sarah? She tilted her head, considering the question like it was a math problem. Since Margaret? 3. Maybe 4, depending on how you count the one who was already sick. I sat down heavily on her bed, feeling every one of my 63 years. My daughter was a serial killer. She was working for organized crime. And she was telling me about it like we were discussing the weather. The dinner on Sunday, I said. You were really going to try again. Vincent wanted me to. He thought it was suspicious that I'd only made one attempt on you. Said it looked unprofessional. Sarah shrugged. But now that you know, I'll have to tell him the arrangement is off. He won't be happy about it. What does that mean? It means we both have a problem, Dad. Because Vincent doesn't like loose ends, and you've just become a very big loose end. The threat in her words was unmistakable. If I tried to expose Sarah, I wouldn't just be putting her at risk, I'd be putting myself in the crosshairs of people who made murder their business. But then I thought about Tyler, about the text that had saved my life, about the courage it had taken for a 12-year-old boy to stand up to his own mother to protect his grandfather. And I thought about Margaret, about the letter she'd written to warn me from beyond the grave, about the love that had motivated her to protect me even when she couldn't protect herself. Some things are worth the risk. Let me ask you something, Sarah, I said, standing up from the bed. Do you feel anything about what you've done? Any guilt, any remorse, any regret? She considered the question seriously, like she genuinely wanted to give me an honest answer. I feel bad that it had to be this way. I feel bad that Tyler got involved. I feel bad that you found out. But regret? No, Dad. I don't regret doing what I had to do to protect my son. And the other people you killed? The ones who weren't family? They were strangers. They were problems that needed solving. I don't feel anything about them. That's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that the daughter I'd raised was gone. Whatever Sarah had become, whatever combination of desperation and greed and moral emptiness had created this person standing in front of me, it wasn't someone I could save or reason with or forgive. It was someone who needed to be stopped. I'm leaving now, I said, walking toward the bedroom door. And Sarah? I want you to think very carefully about what you do next. Because if anything happens to me, anything at all, Tommy Reeves has copies of everything I found in this house today. He has instructions to take it all to the FBI if something happens to me. It was a bluff. Tommy had no idea I'd broken into Sarah's house, and I hadn't had time to copy anything. But Sarah didn't know that. You're making a mistake, Dad, she called after me as I reached the bedroom door. Vincent Caruso isn't someone you want to cross. And neither am I. I turned back to look at her one last time. No, Sarah. The mistake was thinking you were still my daughter. I walked out of that house knowing that the war between Sarah and me had just escalated to a level I'd never imagined possible. But I also knew that I couldn't back down now. Too many people had already died, and if I let fear control my actions, more people would die in the future. Including, very possibly, Tyler. As I drove home, my mind was already working on the next phase of my plan. Because Sarah had made one crucial error in our confrontation, she'd told me too much. She'd revealed not just what she'd done, but what she was continuing to do, and who she was doing it for. Vincent Caruso might be dangerous, but he was also a criminal with a long history of violence. The kind of criminal the FBI would be very interested in learning more about, especially if they had an inside source who could provide information about his current activities. Sarah thought she held all the cards in this game. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. The real war was just beginning. I drove straight to Tommy's house after leaving Sarah's, my hands still shaking from adrenaline and shock. When he opened his front door and saw my face, He immediately pulled me inside and poured me a double whiskey without asking if I wanted it. Jesus Christ, Bobby. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse than that, I said, and told him everything. The break-in, Margaret's letter, Sarah's confession, her work for Vincent Caruso, the casual way she discussed murdering strangers for money. Tommy listened without interrupting, his cop face getting harder and more focused with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring into his own whiskey glass. Bobby, this is way beyond what we can handle on our own. We're talking about organized crime, multiple murders, a professional killer. This needs to go to the feds. I know. But how do we do that without getting Tyler hurt? And how do we do it without admitting I broke into Sarah's house? We're going to have to be very careful about how we approach this. But I have someone who might be able to help. Tommy pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Agent Lisa Chin, FBI. I worked with her on a case a few years back, cross-jurisdictional thing involving organized crime in LA. She's good people, and she specializes in exactly this kind of investigation. 2 days later, I found myself in a coffee shop in downtown Los Angeles, sitting across from a woman who didn't look old enough to be out of college, let alone be an FBI agent. Lisa Chin was maybe 30, 5 feet tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Mr. Hartwell, she said after Tommy made the introductions. Detective Reeves has given me a basic overview of your situation, but I need to hear it from you. Start from the beginning. I told her everything, from Tyler's text message to Sarah's confession. Agent Chin took notes in a small notebook, occasionally asking for clarification but mostly just listening. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Hartwell, what you're describing is a RICO case. Racketeering, organized crime, multiple murders. If even half of what you've told me is true, we're looking at bringing down a significant criminal organization. What does that mean for Tyler? For my grandson? That depends on how we handle this. Your daughter is both a perpetrator and, in some ways, a victim. The debt she owed to Caruso put her in an impossible position, and people in those positions sometimes make choices they wouldn't otherwise make. She murdered my wife. She tried to murder me. She's killed at least 3 other people. At what point do we stop making excuses for her choices? Agent Chen nodded. You're right. She made those choices, and she has to face the consequences. But if she's willing to cooperate, if she's willing to help us build a case against Caruso and his organization, there might be ways to minimize the impact on her son. You're talking about a deal. I'm talking about justice. For your wife, for the other victims, for all the potential future victims. Vincent Caruso has been on our radar for years, but we've never been able to get close enough to build a solid case. If your daughter is working for him, if she has inside information about his operations. I understood what she was saying, but the idea of Sarah getting a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation made me sick. What kind of deal are we talking about? That would depend on the quality and quantity of information she could provide. But Mr. Hartwell, I need you to understand something. Even without a deal, building a murder case against your daughter is going to be extremely difficult. Your wife was cremated, so there's no physical evidence of poisoning. The financial crimes are easier to prove, but they're not murder charges. So she just gets away with it? Not necessarily. But we need to be realistic about what we can actually prove in court versus what we know happened. Sometimes the system isn't perfect, but it's what we have to work with. Over the next hour, Agent Chen outlined a plan that was both brilliant and terrifying. I would wear a wire and meet with Sarah again, try to get her to confess to specific details about her work for Caruso. If we could get enough information about his organization, about the murders she'd committed for him, the FBI could move in and arrest both of them. What about my safety? I asked. If Sarah figures out I'm wearing a wire, or if Caruso decides I'm too much of a risk, we'll have surveillance teams watching you at all times. And Mr. Hartwell, I'm going to be honest with you, there is significant risk involved. But the alternative is letting a serial killer continue operating, letting a criminal organization continue threatening and murdering people. How many more Tylers are going to lose their mothers to people like Caruso? That night, I called Tyler from a burner phone Agent Chin had given me. Sarah had been monitoring my regular phone calls, she'd warned me, probably at Caruso's direction. Grandpa? Tyler's voice was small and scared when he answered. Mom said you broke into our house? She said you took some of Grandma Margaret's things. Tyler, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your mom is in serious trouble, and I'm trying to help her, but it's going to get complicated. Are you somewhere private where you can talk? I'm in my room. Mom's on the phone with someone. She's been on the phone a lot lately. Tyler, I need you to promise me something. If your mom tries to take you somewhere suddenly, especially somewhere far away, I need you to call this number. I gave him the number for Agent Chen's direct line. Can you remember that number? Grandpa, you're scaring me. What's happening? How do you explain to a 12-year-old that his mother is a killer? How do you tell him that the woman who reads him bedtime stories and packs his lunch also murders people for money? Your mom made some bad choices because she was trying to protect you, Tyler. But now those choices are catching up with her, and things are going to happen fast. I need you to be brave, and I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Yeah, Grandpa. I can do that. And Tyler? That night when you texted me about not eating, you saved my life. I want you to know that, no matter what happens next. There was a long pause, and when Tyler spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. I know what Mom was trying to do, Grandpa. I've known for a while. She's been different. Scary different. My heart broke for this kid who'd been carrying that knowledge, that fear, all by himself. You don't have to carry that alone anymore, Tyler. I'm going to fix this. Promise? I promise. The next day, I met with Agent Chin to get fitted with the wire. It was smaller than I'd expected, no bigger than a button, attached to a recording device that clipped to my belt and was hidden under my shirt. Remember, Agent Chin said as she tested the equipment, you don't want to sound like you're conducting an interview. This needs to feel like a natural conversation. Get her talking about specifics, names, dates, methods, locations. The more detail she gives you, the stronger our case becomes. What if she realizes what I'm doing? Then you get out of there immediately. Don't try to be a hero, Mr. Hartwell. These people kill for a living. I called Sarah and told her I wanted to meet, that I'd been thinking about our conversation and maybe we could work something out. She agreed to meet me at a restaurant in Riverside, neutral territory where she'd feel safe. But when I arrived, Sarah wasn't alone. Vincent Caruso was sitting across from her in the booth, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were the coldest things I'd ever seen. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an interrogation. Mr. Hartwell, Caruso said, gesturing to the empty seat beside Sarah. Please sit. Your daughter and I have been discussing your situation. I sat down, hyper-aware of the recording device under my shirt, praying that the surveillance team Agent Chin had promised was actually out there somewhere. Sarah tells me you've discovered some things about her recent activities, Caruso continued. She also tells me you might be willing to keep that information to yourself, for the right incentive. This wasn't going according to plan. I was supposed to be getting Sarah to confess, not negotiating with a mob enforcer. I'm not interested in money, I said. No? Then what are you interested in? I looked at Sarah, trying to read her expression. She was terrified, I realized. More scared than I'd ever seen her. I'm interested in my grandson's safety. I'm interested in making sure he doesn't lose his mother. Caruso smiled, but it was the smile of a shark. Those are admirable goals, Mr. Hartwell. But let me explain something to you. Your daughter owes me a debt. Not just money, though there was that, but a professional obligation. She's proven very useful to me, very reliable. I'm not inclined to let that go. What if I paid her debt? Both Sarah and Caruso looked surprised. I hadn't planned to say that, but suddenly it seemed like the only way to keep this conversation going long enough to get what I needed. Dad, no, Sarah said quickly. You don't understand how much. How much? I asked Caruso directly. He considered the question, studying my face like he was trying to figure out if I was serious. Your daughter originally owed me $200,000. With interest and complications, that's grown to $500,000. $500,000. I didn't have $500,000. But Caruso didn't need to know that. And if I paid that, she'd be free of her obligations to you? The financial obligations, yes. But Mr. Hartwell, your daughter has become quite valuable to my organization. She's developed a particular skill set that's difficult to replace. You mean murder? The word hung in the air like a bomb. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Caruso leaned back in the booth and laughed. Your daughter really did tell you everything, didn't she? That was unwise of her. She told me she's killed people for you. That she's been working as a professional killer to pay off her debt. I was trying to get him to confirm details, to give me something the FBI could use, but Caruso was too smart for that. Mr. Hartwell, I'm in the waste management business. Sometimes that involves cleaning up messes that other people create. Your daughter has helped me with some sanitation issues. Nothing more specific than that. But Sarah, bless her guilty conscience, wasn't as careful. Dad, you don't understand. The first one was an accident, sort of. Caruso had me go to this old man's house, someone who owed him money. I was just supposed to scare him, make him understand the consequences of not paying. But he had a heart attack when he saw me, and when Caruso heard about it, he was pleased. He said I had a natural talent for solving problems. Sarah. Caruso's voice was sharp, warning. But Sarah kept talking, like the words had been building up inside her, and now they couldn't be stopped. The second one was a woman in Pasadena. She was going to testify in a case against one of Caruso's friends. I made it look like a drug overdose. Vincent said it was very professional. Sarah stopped talking. Caruso's hand was moving toward his jacket, and I realized with crystal clarity that I was about to die in a family restaurant in Riverside, California. But Sarah wasn't finished. The third one was harder because he was young and healthy. I had to be creative. I got a job cleaning his office building, waited until he was working late alone. Caruso's gun was out now, held low under the table where other diners couldn't see it but pointed directly at my chest. Mr. Hartwell, he said quietly, I think this conversation is over. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to stare death in the face, let me tell you, it's not like the movies. Time doesn't slow down. Your life doesn't flash before your eyes. You just feel very small and very stupid and very aware that you're about to stop existing. But then something happened that none of us expected. Tyler walked into the restaurant. Tyler walked through that restaurant door like he owned the place, scanning the dining room until his eyes locked on our booth. He was carrying his backpack and had the determined expression of someone who'd made a difficult decision and was seeing it through. I watched Caruso's face change as he registered the presence of a child. His gun disappeared back into his jacket so fast I might have imagined it was ever there. Even cold-blooded killers, apparently, had lines they wouldn't cross in public. Tyler? Sarah's voice was sharp with panic. What are you doing here? How did you even? I followed you, Mom. Tyler's voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes as he took in the scene. His mother's terrified expression, Caruso's barely concealed menace, my own obvious distress. I've been following you a lot lately. I know about him. He pointed at Caruso. I know about the phone calls. I know about the money. Tyler slid into the booth next to me, and I felt the wire recording device shift against my ribs. Whatever was about to happen, the FBI was getting it all on tape. Son, Caruso said, his voice artificially gentle, this is a grown-up conversation. Why don't you go get yourself some ice cream at the counter? No thank you, Mr. Caruso. I'd rather stay here and listen to you talk about the people my mom has killed for you. The silence that followed Tyler's words was deafening. I stared at this 12-year-old boy who just walked into a situation that could get him killed, and I realized he wasn't there by accident. This wasn't a child stumbling into an adult situation. This was calculated, deliberate. Tyler was running his own operation. Tyler, I said quietly, how long have you known? Since before Grandma Margaret died. I saw Mom going through Grandma's pills, taking some out and replacing them with different ones. When I asked her about it, she told me Grandma was confused and kept taking the wrong doses, so she was helping manage her medication. Sarah's face had gone completely white. Tyler, stop talking. Please. But Tyler kept going, his voice gaining strength. Then after Grandma died, I started paying more attention. I watched Mom go through your things when you weren't looking. I saw her copying your signatures, practicing them over and over. I found the papers with your bank account information. Caruso was watching this family drama unfold with the fascination of someone seeing something genuinely unexpected. Bright kid, he murmured. The night Mom tried to poison you, Grandpa, I'd been watching her all day. She was nervous, making phone calls, crying. When she was cooking dinner, I saw her add something to your food from a small bottle she kept hidden in her purse. That's enough, Tyler. Sarah's voice was desperate now. You don't understand. I understand that you killed Grandma Margaret. I understand that you tried to kill Grandpa. And I understand that this man has been making you kill other people. Tyler's voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. What I don't understand is why you didn't just ask for help. The simple honesty of that question hit me like a physical blow. Here was a 12-year-old boy who'd been living with the knowledge that his mother was a killer, and his primary emotion wasn't fear or anger. It was confusion about why she hadn't just asked for help. Caruso leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Tyler, is it? You seem like a very observant young man. Tell me, have you shared these observations with anyone else? The question was casual, but there was unmistakable menace underneath it. Caruso was trying to figure out if Tyler represented a threat that needed to be eliminated. Tyler looked directly at Caruso with no trace of fear. I've told my friend's dad. He's a police officer. I've also told my teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. She's a mandated reporter, which means she has to report suspected child abuse to the authorities. My heart stopped. Tyler was either the bravest kid I'd ever met, or he was about to get us all killed. But Caruso just laughed. Smart boy. Very smart. You've created a situation where if anything happens to you, multiple people will know exactly where to look for answers. Yes, sir. I have. And what do you want, Tyler? What's your endgame here? Tyler took a deep breath, and I realized he'd been preparing for this moment, thinking through every angle. I want my mom to stop killing people. I want my grandpa to be safe. And I want you to leave my family alone. Those are reasonable requests. But your mother owes me money, Tyler. A lot of money. And she's performed certain services for me that I've come to depend on. How much money? Caruso glanced at me, amused. $500,000. Tyler didn't even blink. I can get you $500,000. Both Sarah and I stared at him in shock. What 12-year-old has access to that kind of money? Tyler, Sarah said. You can't. Yes, I can, Mom. Grandma Margaret left me money in a trust fund. A lot of money. It was supposed to be for college, but I can access it early under certain circumstances. Like if my family is in danger. Margaret had set up a trust fund for Tyler? I'd handled all of her finances after she died, and I didn't remember anything about a trust fund. Tyler saw my confusion and explained. She set it up through her lawyer, Mr. Davidson, not through you, Grandpa. She said she wanted to make sure I'd be taken care of no matter what happened to the family. She made me promise not to tell anyone about it unless it was an emergency. Margaret, even in death, was still protecting us. Caruso was watching Tyler with new respect. And you think this qualifies as an emergency? My mom has killed at least 4 people. You're threatening to kill my grandfather. I think this definitely qualifies as an emergency. The matter-of-fact way Tyler discussed his mother's murders was heartbreaking. No child should have to carry that knowledge, should have to negotiate for his family's lives with a criminal. The trust fund has $800,000 in it, Tyler continued. I'll give you $500,000 to clear Mom's debt and leave us alone. The other $300,000 goes toward getting Mom the help she needs. What kind of help? Caruso asked. Therapy. Maybe a hospital stay. She's sick, Mr. Caruso. People don't just start killing other people unless something is very wrong with them. Out of the mouths of babes. Tyler had articulated something I'd been struggling with. The question of whether Sarah was evil or whether she was broken. Caruso considered Tyler's offer, drumming his fingers on the table. $800,000 is a lot of money for a 12-year-old to have access to. It's not just about the money, Tyler said. It's about the complications. If you hurt me or my grandpa, the police will investigate. If they investigate, they'll find out about the murders Mom committed for you. If they find out about those murders, they'll investigate your business. That's going to cost you a lot more than $500,000 in legal fees and lost revenue. I stared at my grandson in amazement. This kid had thought through all the angles, understood the power dynamics, and basically backed a professional criminal into a corner using nothing but logic and preparation. You know what, Tyler? Caruso said finally. I like you. You think like a businessman. Your offer is acceptable, with one condition. What condition? Your mother has to disappear. Not dead, just gone. She knows too much about my operations to stay in the area. She'll relocate somewhere far away, start over with a new identity, and never contact any of you again. No. Tyler's response was immediate and firm. That's not acceptable. Tyler, Sarah started. No, Mom. You made mistakes, but you made them because this man put you in an impossible situation. I'm not going to let him separate our family forever because of that. Caruso's expression hardened. Son, you're not in a position to negotiate. Actually, I am. Tyler pulled out his phone. You see, while we've been talking, this entire conversation has been live streaming to a private YouTube channel that only 3 people have access to. If this stream suddenly cuts off, or if any of us don't check in within the next hour, those 3 people will take the recording directly to the FBI. The blood drained from Caruso's face. You've been recording this? I've been recording everything since I sat down. Your confession about Mom working for you. Mom's confessions about the specific people she killed. Your threats against my grandfather. All of it. I realized Tyler had just accomplished something I'd failed to do with a professional FBI wire. He'd gotten both Sarah and Caruso to confess to multiple felonies on tape, and he'd done it using nothing but a smartphone and pure courage. Caruso's hand moved toward his jacket again, but Tyler held up his phone. The 3 people watching this stream include a police officer and a federal agent. If anything happens to me, they'll have everything they need to arrest you and everyone you work with. Tyler, I whispered. How did you? I called the number you gave me, Grandpa. Agent Chin has been helping me plan this for the past 2 days. She's been teaching me how to get confessions on tape and how to stay safe while doing it. My 12-year-old grandson had been working with the FBI behind my back, running a counterintelligence operation that had just solved a case the federal government had been trying to crack for years. Caruso stood up slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. This isn't over, Tyler. You may think you're clever, but you have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I do know who I'm dealing with, Tyler said calmly. I'm dealing with Vincent Caruso, age 53, 3 prior arrests for extortion and assault, suspected in at least 12 murders over the past decade but never convicted due to lack of evidence. You operate primarily in Southern California, with connections to organized crime families in Nevada and Arizona. Your primary sources of income are illegal gambling, money laundering, and contract killing. Caruso stared at Tyler like he was seeing a ghost. How do you? Agent Chin shared your file with me. She wanted to make sure I understood the risks of what I was planning to do. But Mr. Caruso, here's what you need to understand. I'm not just some kid who got lucky. I've been planning this for weeks. I've thought through every possible scenario, every way this could go wrong, every move you might make. Tyler stood up and looked Caruso directly in the eye. You have two choices. You can take the $500,000 and disappear forever, leaving my family alone. Or you can try to hurt us and spend the rest of your life in federal prison based on the evidence I've already gathered. For a moment, I thought Caruso might actually try to shoot a 12-year-old boy in a crowded restaurant. But then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. You know what, kid? You've got more balls than most of the men I work with. Your offer is accepted. But Tyler? If you ever cross me again, if your family ever becomes a problem for me again, all the federal agents in the world won't be able to protect you. Understood, Tyler said. But Mr. Caruso? If you ever threaten my family again, you'll discover that I learned a lot more from Agent Chin than just how to get confessions on tape. Caruso left the restaurant without another word, and I realized I was shaking. Tyler sat back down next to me, suddenly looking like the 12-year-old boy he actually was, exhausted, overwhelmed, but relieved. Sarah was crying silently, staring at her son like she was seeing him for the first time. Tyler, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to do this. I'm so sorry you had to know about any of this. I know, Mom. And we're going to get you help. Real help. But first, we need to go meet with Agent Chin. She's been waiting in the parking lot this whole time. As we walked out of that restaurant together, I realized that Tyler had just saved not only my life and Sarah's life, but possibly dozens of future victims who would never have to face Vincent Caruso's brand of justice. My 12-year-old grandson had just taken down a criminal organization using nothing but courage, intelligence, and a smartphone. But the story wasn't over yet. Because saving Sarah from Caruso was only the beginning. Now we had to figure out how to save Sarah from herself. Agent Chin was indeed waiting in the parking lot, along with what looked like half the FBI's Los Angeles field office. As soon as we walked out of the restaurant, we were surrounded by federal agents, and I realized Tyler's live stream had been broadcasting directly to a mobile command center. Tyler, Agent Chin said as she approached us, that was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. Don't ever do anything like that again without telling me first. But she was smiling when she said it, and I could see the admiration in her eyes. Tyler had just handed the FBI their biggest organized crime bust in years. Agent Chin, Tyler said, suddenly looking every bit the exhausted 12-year-old he was. Did you get everything you needed? We got more than we needed. Vincent Caruso, 3 of his associates, and your mother are all going to be arrested tonight based on the evidence you gathered. Tyler, you just solved cases we've been working on for half a decade. Sarah had been silent during this exchange, but now she stepped forward. Agent Chin, I want to make a deal. Full cooperation, everything I know about Caruso's organization, in exchange for minimal prison time and protection for my son. Mrs. Henderson, you're going to need a lawyer before we discuss any deals. But yes, given what you've provided today and what you could potentially provide going forward, the Bureau would be very interested in discussing cooperation. Over the next 6 hours, I watched my family's life get dissected by federal agents. Sarah was arrested, but she was immediately transferred to federal custody where she began debriefing sessions that would continue for months. Tyler was placed in protective custody, which, practically speaking, meant he came to stay with me while the FBI made sure Caruso's associates weren't planning any retaliation. But the hardest part wasn't the arrests, or the legal proceedings, or even the media attention that followed. The hardest part was the conversation Tyler and I had that first night, sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m. when neither of us could sleep. Grandpa, Tyler said, stirring hot chocolate that had gone cold an hour earlier. Do you think Mom is evil? It was the question I'd been dreading, the one I'd been asking myself since that first dinner when I'd seen the anticipation in Sarah's eyes as she watched me lift poisoned food to my mouth. I think your mom is broken, Tyler. I think she made terrible choices for what she thought were good reasons, and those choices changed her into someone I don't recognize. But she killed people. She killed Grandma Margaret. The pain in his voice was devastating. This kid had been carrying the knowledge of his mother's crimes alone, protecting everyone else from the truth while sacrificing his own innocence. Yes, she did. And she has to face the consequences of that. But Tyler, none of that is your fault. None of it is your responsibility. You saved lives today, mine, probably dozens of other people who would have been Caruso's future victims. You did something incredibly brave. I just wanted my family back, Tyler whispered. I wanted my mom to stop being scared all the time. I wanted Sunday dinners where nobody was trying to poison anybody. I reached across the table and took his hand. I know, kiddo. I wanted that too. The next morning brought news that changed everything again. Vincent Caruso was found dead in his jail cell, apparently having suffered a heart attack during the night. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes, but Agent Chen pulled me aside and explained the reality. Caruso knew too much about too many people, Mr. Hartwell. His death was probably inevitable once he was arrested. This actually simplifies things for your daughter. With Caruso gone, the primary threat against your family is eliminated. What does that mean for Sarah's case? It means the Bureau is even more interested in her cooperation. She's now one of the few people who can provide inside information about Caruso's entire network. If she's willing to testify against his associates, we can offer her a very favorable deal. Sarah's deal ended up being better than any of us had expected. In exchange for her complete cooperation, testifying in dozens of cases, providing detailed information about Caruso's operations, helping the FBI locate and arrest his network of associates, she received a sentence of 15 years with the possibility of parole in 8. She would miss Tyler's teenage years, his high school graduation, probably his college graduation. But she would eventually come home. More importantly for Tyler's immediate well-being, the trust fund Margaret had set up for him was real and substantial. Not only was there enough money to pay off Sarah's debts, though with Caruso dead, those debts had essentially been forgiven, but there was enough to secure Tyler's future and pay for the therapy he desperately needed. Margaret, even in death, was still taking care of her family. The media called it the grandson hero case, the story of a 12-year-old boy who took down a criminal organization to save his family. Tyler hated the attention, but I was proud of him in ways I couldn't even articulate. But pride and love don't erase trauma, and Tyler struggled in the months that followed. He had nightmares about his mother, about the people she'd killed, about the confrontation with Caruso. He blamed himself for Sarah's imprisonment, even though everyone told him he'd done the right thing. That's when we found Dr. Rachel Martinez, a therapist who specialized in children who'd experienced family trauma. Dr. Martinez helped Tyler understand that his mother's choices weren't his responsibility, that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from the consequences of their actions, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it's painful. She helped me understand some things too. Like how my own grief over losing Margaret had blinded me to Sarah's deteriorating mental state. How my desire for revenge, while understandable, had put both Tyler and myself in danger. How healing from betrayal is a process, not a destination. 6 months after Sarah's arrest, Tyler and I established a new routine. He lived with me full-time, which was an adjustment for both of us. I hadn't raised a child in decades, and Tyler had never lived with anyone but Sarah. But we figured it out together. We had dinner together every night, no phones allowed at the table, and I always let Tyler see me prepare the food. We did homework together, watched movies together, talked about everything from school drama to Sarah's situation to Tyler's dreams for the future. And once a month, we visited Sarah in federal prison. Those visits were hard for everyone involved. Sarah had lost weight, looked older than her years, and struggled with guilt about the impact her choices had had on her son. But she was getting help too, therapy, medication for depression and anxiety, job training for when she was eventually released. I know you probably hate me, she said to Tyler during one of our visits. I don't hate you, Mom. I'm angry at you, and I'm disappointed in you, and I'm sad about what happened. But I don't hate you. I hate what I became, Sarah replied. I hate the person I turned into when I was desperate and scared. But Tyler, I need you to know something. Even when I was at my worst, even when I was doing terrible things, You were always the best part of me. You were always the reason I kept trying to find a way out. Then why didn't you just ask for help, Mom? Why didn't you tell me what was happening? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Because I thought I could fix it myself. I thought I could handle it without involving you or Grandpa or anyone else. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. But I wasn't in the dark, Mom. I saw everything. And not knowing what was happening was scarier than knowing. That conversation was a turning point for all of us. Sarah finally understood that her attempts to protect Tyler by hiding the truth had actually caused him more harm. I understood that my attempts to handle the situation alone had put Tyler in danger. And Tyler understood that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, but that doesn't mean they stop being worthy of love. It's been 3 years now since that night when Tyler texted me from across the dinner table. 3 years since I almost took a bite that would have killed me. 3 years since my world turned upside down and inside out. Tyler is 15 now, a sophomore in high school. He's on the debate team, plays guitar in a local band, and has a girlfriend who thinks his grandfather is surprisingly cool for someone so old. He still has nightmares sometimes, still goes to therapy, still struggles with the weight of what he experienced. But he's also one of the strongest, most compassionate people I've ever known. Sarah has served 3 years of her sentence. She's earned her GED, completed a paralegal training program, and become a mentor to other women in the prison. She writes to Tyler every week, and their relationship is slowly healing. She'll be eligible for parole in 5 more years. As for me, I'm 66 now, and I've learned things about myself I never expected to learn. I've learned that revenge is a luxury I couldn't afford when Tyler's well-being was at stake. I've learned that sometimes the people we love most are capable of things that would destroy us if we let them. And I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing, it's about choosing to build something new from the wreckage of what was destroyed. I still miss Margaret every day. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd paid closer attention to Sarah's mental state after Margaret's diagnosis. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, thinking about that dinner, about how close I came to dying without ever knowing why. But I also wake up every morning grateful that Tyler was brave enough to send that text, smart enough to keep investigating even when it scared him, and strong enough to save all of us when the adults had failed. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've stayed with me through all the pain and betrayal and ultimate redemption, I want you to know something: family is complicated. The people we love are capable of hurting us in ways we never imagine. But they're also capable of saving us in ways we never expect. Tyler saved my life with a text message. But more than that, he saved our family's future by being brave enough to demand the truth and strong enough to handle it when he found it. Margaret saved us all by thinking ahead, by setting up protections we didn't even know we needed. Her love reached across death to provide for Tyler's future and give us the resources we needed to survive Sarah's betrayal. And Sarah? Sarah saved herself by finally accepting help, by cooperating with the FBI, by choosing to face the consequences of her actions instead of running from them. The story I set out to tell was about revenge. But it turns out it was really about redemption, about the ways love persists even in the face of unforgivable betrayal, about how sometimes the youngest among us are the ones with the courage to demand that the truth be told. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about your own family relationships or your own capacity for both betrayal and forgiveness, please hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tyler and I read every single one, and knowing that our story has reached people all over the world gives meaning to everything we've been through. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with us through the darkest parts of our story. And remember, sometimes the text message that changes everything comes from the most unexpected source. Pay attention to the people who love you, especially the young ones. They see more than you think, and their courage might just save your life. The first year after Sarah's arrest was the hardest of my life, and I'd lived through Vietnam, my parents' deaths, and losing Margaret to cancer. But nothing had prepared me for the complexity of raising a traumatized teenager while dealing with my own grief, anger, and guilt. Tyler threw himself into school and extracurricular activities with an intensity that worried me. He was getting straight A's, but he was also working until midnight every night, as if staying busy could keep the nightmares at bay. His friends' parents looked at him with a mixture of pity and fascination. He was the kid whose mother was a killer, the boy who'd taken down the mob. He hated the attention. "Grandpa," he said one evening as we sat in my living room, him doing homework while I pretended to watch the news, "do you think I'm going to turn out like Mom?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Tyler, what makes you ask that?" "I've been reading about genetics, about how criminal behavior can run in families. And sometimes I get angry, really angry, and I think about hurting people who hurt other people. Is that normal, or is that how it started for Mom?" Dr. Martinez had warned me that Tyler might start questioning his own nature as he got older, might worry about inheriting Sarah's capacity for violence. But knowing it was coming didn't make the conversation any easier. "Tyler, everyone gets angry sometimes. The difference is what you do with that anger. Your mom let her anger and fear turn her into someone she wasn't. You've used your anger to protect people and fight for justice. That's not the same thing at all. But what if I make bad choices? What if I hurt people like she did?" I set down my coffee and looked at this kid who carried so much weight on his young shoulders. "Tyler, do you remember what you did when you found out your mom was planning to poison me?" "I texted you to warn you." "Exactly. You saw someone you loved about to hurt someone else you loved, and your first instinct was to protect both of us. That's not the instinct of someone who's going to become a killer. That's the instinct of someone who's going to spend his life protecting people." We had variations of this conversation dozens of times over the next few years. Tyler struggled with guilt about Sarah's imprisonment, with anger about what she'd done, with fear about his own future. But slowly, with Dr. Martinez's help and a lot of patient conversations, he began to understand that he wasn't responsible for his mother's choices and he wasn't doomed to repeat them. The second year brought unexpected challenges. Tyler started having panic attacks, not nightmares, but full-blown anxiety episodes triggered by things like unexpected phone calls or changes in routine. The first one happened during a school assembly when they were discussing college planning. Tyler had to be taken to the nurse's office, hyperventilating and convinced he was having a heart attack. When I picked him up from school, he was embarrassed and frustrated. "I don't understand why this is happening now, Grandpa. It's been 2 years. Shouldn't I be better by now?" Dr. Martinez explained that trauma doesn't follow a timeline, that sometimes our minds take years to process experiences that were too overwhelming to handle in the moment. She increased Tyler's therapy sessions and taught him coping techniques for managing anxiety. But she also suggested something that surprised me. She thought Tyler might benefit from reconnecting with Sarah. "I know that sounds counterintuitive," Dr. Martinez said during a session where Tyler had given permission for me to sit in. "But Tyler has been carrying a lot of unresolved feelings about his relationship with his mother. Some anger, some grief, but also some love that he feels guilty about. Seeing Sarah in person, in a controlled environment where she can't hurt him, might help him process those feelings." Tyler was reluctant at first. He'd been writing to Sarah, but he hadn't seen her since the day she was arrested. The idea of visiting her in prison scared him. "What if seeing her makes everything worse?" he asked me. "What if I can't handle it? Then we'll leave. Tyler, you're in control here. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for." But maybe Dr. Martinez is right. Maybe seeing your mom, seeing that she's getting help and taking responsibility for what she did, might give you some peace. The first prison visit was awkward and emotional for everyone. Sarah looked different, older, thinner, but also somehow more present than she'd been in years. She was taking medication for her depression and anxiety, participating in therapy groups, and working toward her GED. She looked like herself again, instead of the desperate stranger she'd become in those final months before her arrest. "Tyler," she said when we sat down at the visitation table, "you've gotten so tall. You look so grown up." "I'm 15 now, Mom." "I know. I've missed so much already." There was an uncomfortable silence, and I could see Tyler struggling with what to say. Finally, He looked directly at his mother and asked the question that had been haunting him for 2 years. Mom, when you were planning to kill Grandpa, were you thinking about me at all? Were you thinking about what would happen to me if you got caught? Sarah's composure cracked, and she started crying. Tyler, I was thinking about you constantly. Everything I did was because I was trying to protect you from Vincent Caruso. I was terrified of what he would do to you if I didn't pay him back. But you were going to make me an orphan. If you'd killed Grandpa and gotten away with it, you would have kept killing people until eventually you got caught. And then I would have been alone. It was a brutal assessment, but it was accurate. Sarah nodded, accepting the truth of it. You're right. I was so focused on the immediate threat that I didn't think about the long-term consequences. I was making decisions based on fear instead of thinking clearly about what would actually be best for you. I would rather have been hurt by Caruso's people than lose both you and Grandpa, Tyler said quietly. I would rather have been poor or homeless or even dead than live with knowing my mom was a killer. The honesty of that statement was devastating, but it was also healing. For the first time since her arrest, Sarah understood the full impact of her choices on her son. Over the following months, our prison visits became easier. Sarah was genuinely working on herself, taking responsibility for her actions, and learning to communicate in ways that didn't involve manipulation or deception. Tyler was learning to separate his love for his mother from his judgment of her actions. But the real breakthrough came during our 4th visit, when Tyler asked Sarah about Margaret. Mom, did you love Grandma Margaret? Sarah was quiet for a long time before answering. Yes, Tyler. I loved her very much. She was the only real mother I ever had. Then why did you kill her? Because I was selfish and desperate, and I convinced myself that she was going to die anyway, so it didn't matter if I helped it happen faster. But Tyler, I want you to understand something. What I did to Margaret is the thing I'm most ashamed of. Not just because it was wrong, but because she deserved so much better from me. She loved me, and I repaid that love with betrayal. Do you think she would forgive you? Sarah considered this carefully. I think Margaret would want me to become a better person. I think she would want me to make amends in whatever ways I can. I don't know if she would forgive me, and I'm not sure I deserve to be forgiven. But I know she would want me to spend the rest of my life trying to do better. That conversation marked a turning point in Tyler's healing process. He began to understand that love and accountability could coexist, that he could love his mother while still holding her responsible for her actions. The 3rd year brought new challenges as Tyler started thinking about college and his future. He was incredibly bright. All that intelligence he'd used to outmaneuver Vincent Caruso was now being channeled into academics. But he was also dealing with the practical realities of his situation. Grandpa, he said one day as we were working on college applications, what am I supposed to write in my personal essay? My mother is a serial killer, but I learned valuable leadership skills by taking down a criminal organization when I was 12? It was a fair point. Tyler's story was compelling, but it was also complicated. How do you explain your family situation to college admissions officers without it overshadowing everything else about who you are? Dr. Martinez suggested that Tyler focus on what he'd learned about resilience, about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult, about the importance of seeking help when you're facing problems bigger than yourself. His essay ended up being about the difference between secrets and privacy, about how keeping dangerous secrets can destroy families while maintaining appropriate privacy can protect them. He was accepted to 7 universities, including 2 Ivy League schools. But in the end, he chose UCLA because it would keep him close to home, close to me, and close enough to continue visiting Sarah. I want to study criminal justice, he told me when he made his decision. I want to understand how people like Mom end up making the choices they make, and I want to help prevent other families from going through what we went through. I was proud of him, but also worried. Tyler, are you sure you want to spend your career dealing with criminals and victims? Haven't you been through enough trauma? Grandpa, I've been through trauma, but I've also learned that I'm good in crisis situations. I'm good at seeing patterns, at figuring out what people really mean when they're not saying it directly. And I understand what it feels like to be caught between loving someone and needing them to face consequences for their actions. Maybe I can use that experience to help other people. As I write this, Tyler is starting his sophomore year at UCLA. He's majoring in criminal justice with a minor in psychology. He's made friends, joined clubs, started dating a girl named Emma who makes him laugh and doesn't treat him like he's fragile. He still sees Dr. Martinez occasionally, but mostly he's learned to manage his anxiety and trauma on his own. Sarah has served 4 years of her sentence now. She's completed her GED and is working on a bachelor's degree in social work through a prison education program. She's become a leader among the women in her facility, helping newer inmates navigate the system and providing support for other mothers who are separated from their children. She's also been working with the FBI as a consultant, helping them understand the psychology of people who commit crimes under duress. Her insights have helped solve several cases and prevent other people from being forced into similar situations. "I can't undo what I did," she told Tyler during our most recent visit. "But maybe I can help prevent other people from making the same mistakes." As for me, I'm 67 now, officially retired, and learning to be a grandfather in ways I never expected. I've gone from being the victim in this story to being the stable adult in Tyler's life, the one who makes sure he eats vegetables and does his homework and doesn't take on more responsibility than a young man should have to carry. I've also learned to forgive, not because Sarah deserves it, but because carrying anger was poisoning my relationship with Tyler and preventing me from enjoying the life Margaret and I had worked so hard to build. Margaret's jewelry sits in a place of honor on my dresser now, along with her wedding ring and a photo of all of us from Tyler's 8th birthday, back when we were still a normal family with normal problems. I talk to her sometimes, tell her about Tyler's achievements, about Sarah's progress, about how proud she would be of the young man Tyler has become. The story I thought I was telling was about revenge, about a man seeking justice for attempted murder. But it turned out to be about something much more complex: the ways families break and heal, the difference between accountability and abandonment, and the courage it takes to keep loving people even after they've shown you who they really are. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I want you to know that healing is possible. Forgiveness is possible. Building something new from the wreckage of what was destroyed is possible. But it takes time, and it takes help, and it takes the kind of courage that sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources, like a 12-year-old boy with a smartphone and the determination to save his family, no matter the cost. Today marks exactly 5 years since Tyler sent me that text message that saved my life. As I sit here in my kitchen, looking at the same table where I first read, "Grandpa, do not eat. Just trust me," I can hardly believe how much our lives have changed. Tyler is 20 now, a junior at UCLA with a 3.9 GPA and early acceptance to several graduate programs in criminal psychology. But more importantly, he's become the kind of young man who uses his intelligence and strength to protect others, just like he protected me that night 5 years ago. Last week, he called me with news that brought everything full circle. "Grandpa," he said, his voice filled with excitement, "I've been accepted into the FBI's student internship program. Agent Chin personally recommended me. I'm going to be working on cases involving family violence and organized crime." Agent Lisa Chin, who'd started as our FBI contact, had become something like a mentor to Tyler over the years. She'd watched him grow from a traumatized 12-year-old into a confident young man dedicated to justice, and she'd been encouraging him to consider a career in federal law enforcement. "Tyler, that's incredible. But are you sure that's what you want? Working those kinds of cases, dealing with families going through what we went through? That's exactly why I want to do it, Grandpa. I understand what it feels like to be caught between loving someone and needing them to be held accountable. I understand what it's like to be a kid trying to protect adults who should be protecting you. Maybe I can help other families navigate those situations better than we did." 3 days ago, Tyler and I made our monthly visit to see Sarah. She's served 5 years now and is eligible for parole next year. The woman we sat across from in that prison visitation room bore almost no resemblance to the desperate, broken person who tried to poison me. Sarah has earned her bachelor's degree in social work and is 6 months away from completing a master's degree in counseling psychology. She's been running support groups for women in prison who are dealing with substance abuse and domestic violence. She's written letters to the families of her victims, taking full responsibility for her actions and expressing genuine remorse. But the most remarkable change in Sarah is how she talks about her past. There's no self-pity, no excuses, no attempts to minimize what she did. She speaks about her crimes with the clarity of someone who's done the hard work of understanding how she became capable of such terrible things. "Tyler," she said during our visit, "I know you're starting the FBI internship next month. I want you to know how proud I am of you, and I also want you to know that if working with families affected by crime is too difficult for you because of what I put our family through, it's okay to choose a different path. Mom, what you put our family through is exactly why I want to do this work. I learned things about courage and justice and family loyalty that I never would have learned otherwise. I want to use those lessons to help other people." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "Your grandfather and I both failed you when you were 12 years old. We put you in a position where you had to be the adult, where you had to save all of us. I will regret that for the rest of my life. You didn't fail me, Mom. You made bad choices because you were desperate and scared. But you also taught me that people can change, that it's never too late to start making better decisions. And Grandpa taught me that love doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their actions." Then Tyler said something that surprised both Sarah and me. "Mom, when you get out next year, I want you to come live with Grandpa and me for a while. Not permanently, but long enough to get back on your feet, to rebuild your relationship with both of us." I stared at my grandson, amazed once again by his capacity for forgiveness and his understanding of what real love looks like. Sarah was crying now, not the manipulative tears I remembered from years past, but genuine emotion. "Tyler, I don't deserve that kind of second chance. It's not about what you deserve, Mom. It's about what our family needs to heal completely. We've all been broken by what happened, and we can't really heal until we're all together again." That evening, as Tyler and I drove home from the prison, he asked me a question that made me realize how much he'd grown. "Grandpa, are you okay with Mom coming to live with us when she gets out? I probably should have asked you before I offered." I thought about it carefully before answering. 5 years ago, the idea of Sarah living in my house would have terrified me. But the woman we'd visited today wasn't the same person who'd tried to kill me. She'd done the work to understand herself, to take responsibility for her actions, to become someone capable of healthy relationships. "Tyler, I think it's exactly what Margaret would want. She believed in second chances, in the power of families to heal. And you're right, we can't really move forward until we're all together again." But I also knew there would be conditions. Sarah would need to continue therapy, to check in regularly with her parole officer, to demonstrate that she could be trusted with our safety and well-being. We would need family counseling to work through years of trauma and mistrust. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be immediate, but it could work. 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call that brought another piece of our story full circle. It was from Patricia, Margaret's sister in Phoenix, who I'd barely spoken to since that conversation about Margaret's missing medications. "Robert," she said, "I've been following Tyler's story in the news, about his FBI internship and his work with crime victims. I wanted to tell you how proud Margaret would be. And I wanted to apologize for not fighting harder to get through to you when I was trying to warn you about Sarah. Patricia, you did everything you could." Sarah was intercepting those calls. "There was no way for you to know. Still, I should have tried harder. I should have come to California in person. Maybe if I had, Margaret would have lived longer. Or maybe Sarah would have killed you too," I said gently. "Patricia, we can't change what happened. But maybe we can learn from it." Patricia then told me something I hadn't known. "Robert, Margaret asked me to give you something when the time was right. She said I'd know when that time came, and I think it's now." A week later, a package arrived from Phoenix. Inside was a letter from Margaret, written shortly before she died, along with her grandmother's ring, the one piece of jewelry Sarah hadn't stolen because Margaret had given it to Patricia for safekeeping. The letter was addressed to Tyler. "My dearest Tyler," it began. "If you're reading this, then you're old enough to understand some difficult truths about our family. Your mother is in trouble, the kind of trouble that could destroy all of us if we're not careful. I don't know if I'll be alive when this trouble comes to a head, but I know that you're going to be the one who has to handle it." Margaret had known. Somehow, she'd known that Tyler would be the one to save our family. The letter continued. "Tyler, you are the best of all of us. You have your mother's intelligence, your grandfather's sense of justice, and a capacity for love and forgiveness that comes from somewhere deeper than genetics. Whatever choices your mother makes, whatever consequences follow from those choices, remember that you are not responsible for fixing the adults in your life. Your job is to be a child, to learn and grow and become the man you're meant to be. But if the time comes when the adults can't or won't protect each other, if you find yourself in a position where you have to choose between keeping secrets and saving lives, choose to save lives. Choose to tell the truth. Choose to be brave. The people who love you will understand, and the people who don't understand don't deserve your protection." Tyler read that letter sitting in my kitchen, at the same table where he'd saved my life 5 years earlier. When he finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Grandpa," he said finally, "Grandma Margaret knew this was going to happen. She knew Mom would try to hurt you, and she knew I'd be the one to stop it. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Tyler. She understood people, understood family dynamics. She could see patterns that the rest of us missed. Do you think she'd be proud of how everything turned out?" I looked at this remarkable young man who'd grown from a frightened 12-year-old into someone capable of forgiveness, justice, and healing. I thought about Sarah, working to rebuild herself in prison and preparing to rejoin society as someone who could contribute instead of destroy. I thought about our family, broken and scarred but still intact, still capable of love. "Tyler, I think your grandmother would be amazed by what you accomplished. I think she'd be proud of your mother for doing the hard work of changing. And I think she'd be grateful that her family survived and learned to heal." As I finish writing this story, I'm struck by how different it is from the revenge tale I thought I was telling 5 years ago. I set out to make Sarah pay for what she'd done to Margaret and to me. Instead, I learned that real justice isn't about punishment, it's about accountability, change, and the prevention of future harm. Sarah didn't escape consequences for her actions. She served 5 years in federal prison, lost years of her son's life, and has to live with the knowledge of what she did for the rest of her life. But she also got help, changed, and became someone capable of helping others avoid the mistakes she made. Tyler didn't just save my life that night, he saved our entire family's future by refusing to let fear and revenge consume us. He showed us that love and accountability could coexist, that healing was possible even after the worst betrayals. And me? I learned that being a grandfather means more than just loving your grandchild. It means being worthy of their love, worthy of their respect, worthy of the trust they place in you when they text you from across the dinner table to warn you that your life is in danger. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you've watched from wherever you are in the world as my family fell apart and slowly put itself back together, I want you to know something. The people you love are capable of terrible things, but they're also capable of redemption. Healing is possible. Change is possible. Forgiveness is possible. But it takes time, and it takes work, and it takes the kind of courage that sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, like a 12-year-old boy with a smartphone and the determination to save his family, no matter what it costs him. 5 years ago, Tyler texted me from across the dinner table. "Grandpa, do not eat. Just trust me." Those 8 words saved my life and changed our family forever. Today, as I prepare for Tyler's graduation from UCLA and Sarah's eventual release from prison, I have a different message for anyone who might need to hear it. Trust the people who love you enough to tell you hard truths. Listen to the voices that warn you about danger, even when they come from unexpected sources. And remember that sometimes the youngest among us have the clearest vision of what needs to be done. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for listening to our story. And if this has touched you, if it's made you think about your own family or your own capacity for both betrayal and forgiveness, please share it with someone.